Today we're talking about Brene Brown and specifically how you can fail well. Now, I've been a fan of hers for several years. If you've been watching the show, you know I really dig her work as a social scientist, talking about guilt and shame and so forth. This is one of the first quotes that I heard from her book. I believe it was Rising Strong, my favorite book of hers from those. I think it was right after Daring Greatly. But no matter what the case is, it's a killer quote that you need to think about when you're failing. And if we're doing great stuff, we're gonna fail all the time. Here's what she says. Shame is a focus on self, while guilt is a focus on behavior. It's not just semantics. There's a huge difference between I screwed up, guilt, and I am a screw up, shame. The former is acceptance of our imperfect humanity. The latter is basically an indictment of our very existence. Guilt is about having an internal metric where you feel as though you should do something, but you're not. You feel guilty about it. Shame has to do with how you believe other people are judging you. Not how they're actually judging you, but how you believe they're judging you. Imagine that, but that has to do with your relationship with yourself. So if you have a partnership that goes sour, that goes the wrong way, that goes in the direction that you don't feel good about, you might feel guilt about the decisions that you made with it. But shame has to do with how other people will judge you. If you're pointing at other people and saying, this partnership went sour, they did something wrong, you're not taking ownership of your part. Your part is that you chose them as a partner. Your part is that you signed the dotted line with them. Your part is that you married them. Whatever the case may be, you have a part in that. If we get into this game of gold-plated grit, and again, gold-plated grit is us going through a rough time where we just might have eked our way by, and then we made it through, and then we see someone else going through it, and we tell them it's not a big deal. That's gold-plated grit. When we play that game that Brene Brown talks about, we end up not owning our part in those things that failed. Using the words that you might use, not me. If you feel as though something failed, something was a mistake, you're part of that decision. When we don't address those things, then we carry shame. We're afraid of being found out. And that's the biggest problem I found with gold-plated grit when I coach people, even with my own BS, is that when you don't admit how tough of a time you had or how vulnerable you were at that moment where you were struggling, then you're afraid of being found out. That's where the shame comes from. Withholding that from yourself doesn't make any sense. There's two big things from that. If you're trying to make other people feel better and doing a comparative suffering and saying your suffering is worse than mine or whatever, two big problems. Number one, you're gonna have less empathy for yourself. So if I'm having a tough time, like feeling emotion about it, whatever, having a hard time getting through it, and I see someone else and I feel like they're having a harder time, then I'm gonna have less empathy for myself. I'm gonna be like, oh, I can get through this. And so, maybe I won't allow myself to cry. Maybe I won't allow myself to mourn. Whatever the case may be, whatever I need to do, I might limit what I actually end up doing and allowing myself to do because I'm not suffering, in my opinion, as much as they are, so I don't deserve that. So less empathy for ourselves. The second thing, and this is crucial, I talk about that in my book, Bring Your Worth, the predecessor to my new book, Built From Now, is that if we think other people are having a tougher time and we don't allow ourselves to, again, grieve, mourn, go through our, might be Kubler-Ross. I'm screwing up her name, bless her, but talks about the 5 stages of grief. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, finally got it. With the Kubler-Ross thing, as far as the 5 stages of grief, maybe we don't allow ourselves to go through that. Not only do we rob ourselves of going through that emotional experience, and emotions always come up later, so we're not really robbing ourselves. It's just gonna come out in a stronger way later. Keep that in mind. We can't really bury emotions. They always come up later and usually more fierce. But number two, we actually are robbing ourselves of learning. We're not allowing ourselves to learn from that experience. With the challenging times that I've had from escaping Hurricane Katrina to other personal things that have happened over the years, allowing myself as much as possible to go through those stages, that's where the learning happens. Again, when I was talking about the tough time I had a few years ago and confiding in my friend who was also having a tough time that was similar, allowing myself that time to cry, to mourn, to grieve, to be angry, that's where all those lessons are. That's the stuff I'm sharing with you. If I didn't allow myself, if I didn't feel as though that I deserved to feel the way that I felt, because other people were having it, in my eyes, seemed to be having a tougher time, then those lessons, those gems that turned into Bring Your Worth, that turned into my new book, Build From Now, they wouldn't be in there. I wouldn't have anything to share with you. All I'd say is like, yeah, I had a tough time, but I got through it. But how much did I actually experience it? What if we applied that empathy, that thoughtfulness, that sensitivity to all of our relationships and made a decision and said, okay, I think this person's not doing their best, so I need to have a conversation with them. That's one thing. But what Brene Brown's talking about, which is probably more often the case, is that they actually are doing their best. They're just not doing their best based on how we would do it. So, of course, we can't judge how we would walk or run down the street compared to, say, an 18-month-old kid, a toddler. So applying that actually gives us a level of sensitivity. It also makes us think, and again, back to the empathy, think about what it's like in that person's shoes. You know, relationships are complicated. And if you get empathetic and start to think about what the other person's shoes must feel like, then suddenly you start to soften up and that judgment starts to go away. And Brene Brown gets into that. I believe it's in Rising Strong that she talks about that. In her book, Rising Strong, I highly recommend it, where she talks about how when you judge other people, then you're also judging yourself. And so if you're saying, oh, that person's so stupid, I can't believe they can't get it together and all that stuff, the next time you're having a difficult time, which I've seen in live action, you could be talking about someone else and then suddenly you're in that same situation, and that's actually reflective of your own self-dialogue, how you feel about yourself if you're in that same situation. When we spew toxic things or when we're very judgmental of other people, that's often a reflection of how and what standard we have for ourselves. The trouble is that life is complicated. And again, I've lived long enough to see it, where someone's talking about someone else, and then suddenly they're in that same situation, and their psyche can't handle it. But that's because that harshness is too heavy, and they're too judgmental of other people, but also very judgmental of themselves. So as we soften up this idea, and once we're about to lose our cool, which happens to me all the time, so I'm not judging you. If we're about to lose our cool, asking ourselves, do we believe this person is doing the very best that they can? If it's a yes, yeah, let that shit go. And that's it.